This video will be about cancer risks and percentages, and that percentages or ratios don't mean your risk. I'm going to read a header you might have seen on the internet that's put out by people who are dietary or medical activists that want you to believe something. Whether they're citing facts is not relevant to a lot of them, and I'm going to point that out, obviously. 2019, April 17th, you might have seen this reference of a 20% increase in your chance of getting bowel cancer if you eat meat. International Journal of Epidemiology study, under 500,000 Brits were perused through the file systems, not in person. Brits who ate red meat or processed meat 4 or more times a week had a 20% higher cancer risk for colorectal cancer or bowel cancer, compared to those who ate red or processed meat less than twice a week. Basically, if you double the amount of beef you eat, or whatever, it increases your likelihood of getting bowel cancer by 20%. Now, first thing we have to do is, what was their cancer risk before eating only twice a week versus after? What is the actual raw cancer risk? Well, it's 20% increase. From what? You could have people who have a cancer risk from eating twice a week, some processed or red meat, 10 in 100 million, which is jack shit. Considering the population of Britain is 66 million, this would mean 6 people a year. That's not really the statistic, but suddenly it's in perspective. But let's say it was 10 in 100 million. That would mean a 20% increase would be 12 in 100 million, which is still jack shit. But, and you'll see people doing that. Well, they had a 20% increase. If they mention 19 or 20% increase just because you're eating red meat or processed meat, this is the study they're citing. And it only compared other meat eaters. And it didn't tell you what their raw rate was, or their rate per 100,000. Risk of colorectal cancer rose by 19% for every daily 25 gram serving of processed meat. But the UK government said they should keep it less than 90 grams of red processed meat a day. Well, that's almost 100, but let's say that's only triple the 25 grams. Isn't that like, let's see, 19, 20, 60%? No, that's not how stats work. Again, they're not even telling you base rate of how many grams of meat are they eating. Was it just like one piece of bacon? Well, one piece of bacon is deadly. It's the devil's meat. It's still technically a 20% increase, even if it's, increasing from jack shit. It's a 100% increase if it's only one person a year, and it's 2 person another year. So, what's the other statements they'll make? 13% of bowel cancer cases in the UK are caused by eating processed meat. Is that the 4 a week or 2 a week? UK government said Brits should eat less than 90 grams of red or processed meat a day based on this. So let's look up the rest of this. The missing components. Bowel cancer happening in your entire lifespan if you're in the United Kingdom. We're keeping it to the United Kingdom because that's where the study came from. If you're a man, it's 1 in 15. If you're a woman, it's 1 in 18 chance in your entire lifespan. What's your lifespan in Britain? Number of cases of bowel cancer, raw numbers per year. Well, from 2015 to 2017, they had 42,000 cases. That's inclusive. That's probably a 3-year period, right? Or 2-year period, isn't it? 2015, 2017, from 2015 to 2016, and then 2016 to 2017, and then 2017 to just before 2018. 3 years, or is it 2 years? I'm going to assume the worst case scenario per year of 21,000 per year. We're going to use that number because that's not accurate enough. What time during the year? Is it the end of 2015 and the beginning of 2017? That's like a little bit more than a year. But let's assume it's 21,000 a year and call it even. 66 million people in the United Kingdom during those years. Your odds are 3,143 against getting a diagnosis of bowel cancer every year. So if you live for 100 years, 100 years, that could reduce down to 1 in 31 or something. That's very close to the 1 in 15 and 1 in 18 they're talking about. That's where they're getting it from? For your lifespan? Because you might live to be 100? They're assuming that. No, they're not. Anyway, per year, you get a 0.032% chance of getting bowel cancer each year. In 10 years, it's 0.3%. In 100 years, it's 3% chance of your lifespan of you getting bowel cancer, which is about what people run into. The number of people you know personally that have had bowel cancer at all. How old were they? If you're under age of 50, there's only 2,500 cases per year, as another number, of bowel cancer. It's not really double that because obviously I'm fudging the numbers as 21,000, but we're talking about a pretty extreme ratio here where after you hit 50, the odds go way up. Well, where is it centered on? Well, from 70 for men and 80 for women, those are the peak periods when human beings in Britain get bowel cancer. Or more accurately, people who were born 80 years ago or 70 years ago are likely to have been exposed to stuff through their life, or just because they're old, it's because they're old most likely. But let's say it's exposure to something that might have happened 70 or 80 years ago, might have a contributing factor to it. Just might, like, post-war. But that's the peak in bowel cancer cases. And again, if you're under 50, it's much lower. 53% of people live through it. So per year, I'm calculating badly here. I'm going to call it a rounded off number of 9,000, around 9,000 people, or over 9,000 or under 9,000 deaths a year due to bowel cancer, out of, again, 66 million. Okay? You get 1,600 deaths a year, 2018 numbers, I'm rounding up slightly, in England and Wales due to normal influenza itself. Not due to pneumonia, but influenza itself, just influenza. Diagnosed, it's definitely the virus doing it. Normal years. I didn't include 2019 through because these are not normal years we're experiencing now, so screw it. I didn't even let 2019 in, even though it was mostly normal. Mostly harmless. So, it sounds like being old causes cancer. Some cancers happen more often when you're older. Some cancers may have other characteristics that are caused throughout your life from exposure at any time. If you've eaten meat at all, maybe that will cause bowel cancer, so there's no point in not eating it because it doesn't drop your likelihood. Or maybe it does. Study. People who converted from veganism to eating meat, do they have a higher likelihood of getting cancer in the bowel than other vegans or vegetarians? What about people who only eat fish or only eat birds or are eating a rounded diet? This isn't about meat eaters. By the way, if you're a vegan or vegetarian and you call someone a meat eater because they eat meat as well as other things, they're omnivores, not meat eaters. I'm not purely a predator. I have molars and very underdeveloped, in my case missing, eye teeth, aka fangs or incisors. Well, they're not incisors, they're the bicut, whatever they're called, the fang teeth. Tusks. So, no, these are tusks. But you get the idea. Humans are not predispositioned to eating one variety or another. We're not vegetarians and we're not meat eaters. We have to eat a rounded diet. I have trouble digesting fruits and vegetables sometimes, depending on which one. If you're a meat and potatoes person, that's more rounded than a person who just eats meat or just eats potatoes and vegetable material. What about people who have been diagnosed with bowel cancer who then went vegan or vegetarian, which is actually not even a stereotype. That's really something you see on YouTube a lot. What's their death rate? There's a shit ton of vegetarians that claim that were selling themselves and getting money as being food-eating gurus and foodies that tell you how not to die from bowel cancer or whatever, that died from it, that legally forbade any diagnosis mentioning it from being visible. And you can tell that that's what they died from because their family is extremely tight-lipped about it. And countered back by saying, meat is murder, to you too. If we were just vegetarians, our appendix would be larger. It would be active. It wouldn't be a vestigial organ. We would have other characteristics too. Also, the wisdom teeth wouldn't just be a pain in your jaw. And by the way, my front teeth, when they broke, formed more like molars. And my lower teeth were in good condition, which is weird, which meant I had molars with incisors for chopping and grinding. Moo. So let's go on. Here's some information for you. There is no scientific evidence that black salve, bloodroot, sanguinaria candiensis has any medical value for treating anything. Period, full stop. And it has obvious medical side effects or dangers. Also, it acts as a tumor promoter, and by definition, even though people are resistant to saying it, it is a carcinogen because it promotes formation of non-cancer tumors and aggravates tissue that could become cancerous. This has been demonstrated. Zinc chloride, another thing used as a substitute, has no sign of being carcinogenic in and of itself. People use it instead of going in and having a surgical removal. And they say they'd rather literally put on the equivalent to hydrofluoric acid or whatever, burning the tissue, digging in, not selecting just cancer. It eats any tissue. It causes the tissue to stop functioning. It's poisoned to death, and it is a poison. It's listed as a lethal poison at certain levels. And what it does, it causes the cells to die and slough off. They necrotize. They rot off. And no, cancer cells aren't more prone to doing that, unfortunately. Instead of going in and getting a smaller incision, removing just the mass that probably or could be cancer, and then removing it and then biopsying it, just to make sure you don't have it in your skin so it can't go cancerous. Skin cancer is very preventable because it's mostly, almost exclusively caused by being exposed to sunlight. These are the same assholes that go out and tan themselves and then pour basically something to rot their tissue away, and they say they cured cancer when the cancer could still be underneath there because they didn't get a doctor to do it because they got an idiot on the internet to tell them to do it. And yes, they do die from cancer. Maybe cancer they wouldn't have had because, again, it promotes formation of tumors and it aggravates already existing ones, and it can activate dormant cancer cells. What causes people to get cancer as they get older, besides exposure to something in the world? Not dying. All mammals on this planet, if you make them live as long as is medically possible in a zoo or other controlled conditions, or humans, if you give them an idealized life where you don't let them kill themselves through the number one killer, eating ourselves to death and dying from a fucking heart attack. Heart disease kills people much more often than all the shit we're talking about. But if you get rid of all of the things that are preventable, the only thing left is the inevitable. And that is, as you get older, your likelihood of cancer just randomly will go higher. And it always seems to happen in areas that have one characteristic: a larger occurrence of cell division to replace cells. Your digestive system is one of those areas. So is your skin. As cells divide, every time they divide, they get around 100 errors accumulated. The DNA chain splits down the middle, gets put into each cell that's forming, and it gets pieces added to it because it will. But these are not perfect, and you get about 100 errors each time. Each cell division will add 100 errors. Maybe. They get corrected eventually or not. On average, it's 100. After 30 cell divisions, which would make 1 billion cells, you have accumulated, let's say, 3,000 errors. Find out how many cells are in the human body. Now, what that means is that those cells are more likely to have an error that will allow it to just fail to work or start dividing uncontrollably. That's cancer. There's something called a telomere, and it seems to tick off every time you go through a cell division, and after a certain number, if you run out of telomeres, it won't cell divide anymore. The cell operates until it breaks down from something, and it dissolves, and a new cell takes its place sometimes. As you get older, you literally lose the number of cells in your body. The inevitable outcome of not dying from old age is that you will get cancer because eventually the cells don't self-destruct before they go cancerous. The death rate from bowel cancer in the UK starts at ages that used to be impossible to achieve in the UK. And yes, this telomere self-destruct thing is an added benefit to being alive. It keeps you from getting old enough to die from being a mass of cancer cells or lumps. No, you do not have a 20% increase from simply eating meat. That's not how it works, and yes, that was a deceptive work done by the UK government as well. Good day. Thanks for watching. Good luck.